Hey, Comic-Con. Who's having a good Saturday? Come on. We're not done yet. We got a great demo coming up here. I have Mr. John Romita Jr., one of the best artists working in comics today. Artist, he's worked on Batman, he's worked on Superman, he's worked on just about every character imaginable. And as he gets set up here for a little art demo, are you already set up?
I'm ready to roll.
All right, well then.
Oh, shit. Sorry. Now I'm on mic. I can't curse.
Yeah, well, you know.
That's a lot of crap.
Who are you going to draw today?
I draw flies really well.
Well,
no, I'll do some Batman.
do some Batman? You want to
Yes,
see a Batman,
because-
guys? Who's a Batman fan?
All right. The trick is, this goes back to Michelangelo, that you remove everything that doesn't look like the subject matter. So Michelangelo used to chip away everything that didn't look like the statue of David. So I'm going to draw everything that doesn't look like Batman on this piece of paper. That's a joke. I'm just kidding around.
So, for those of you who haven't seen John's work for DC, he's been doing a lot of work on Batman. He did at least the first thing I remember him seeing, or I remember him doing for us, was one shot with set in the world of Mr. Frank Miller's Dark Knight. Mr. Frank Miller is signing behind you guys, by the way. But it was a one-shot called Dark Knight: The Last Crusade, and that was drawn by Mr. Romita Jr. here, written by Frank and by Brian Azzarello. It was a cool little prequel to actually The Dark Knight Returns that came out in the midst of Dark
Where's
Knight
the
3.
eraser? You know, we artists need erasers all the time. I'm just kidding. That's the best thing about being an artist, is having an eraser, because you always mess up.
And then most recently, we saw him draw Batman in Dark Days, the 2-issue prequel comic to Dark Knight's Metal, which is Scott Snyder, Greg Capullo book that we've been promoting here at the show. Now, John, you come from a long family of artists, right? Like, did you know when you were just a child, that this is what you were going to be doing with your life, your career?
Yeah, because I couldn't sing and dance. I had to do something. And halfway through high school, I had to choose something. And it was the only thing that I was relatively good at. I was a decent athlete, decent student, but couldn't hit a curveball, and I wasn't big enough to play linebacker, so I had to do something.
I heard you're a pretty good softball player. I mean, I heard that.
Yes.
I heard that from you, but I heard that. From you.
I'm a decent softball player.
So those of you who aren't familiar with looking or watching comic artists work, most artists start like this by roughing out an image, really kind of rough pencil work before they tighten it up. From that point, then they tend to add inks, or else sometimes some artists have another artist ink their work. But that's when you start seeing the really heavy line art, and eventually it is colored or finished in some way, sometimes by the artist who started it, other times by another colorist. So as this goes, you'll see it get tightened up. A lot of people filming. Last time we did one of these, I don't think there were so many people filming up here. So, John, is Batman your favorite DC character? I know it was one you were really looking forward to work on.
Every time I worked on Marvel characters, I always thought they were the better characters, until I worked on Superman and Batman and realized Batman probably is the best character in all of comics. But it took so long for me to get onto it, to realize it. And all the other guys that wanted to work on Batman, even the guys that never worked on Batman, said, I always wanted to work on Batman. There's something visual about him, with the cape and the horns, and can do so many silhouettes that look outstanding, whereas a lot of other characters are just human silhouettes. Batman's got the ears and the cape, and it's a very interesting visual. Yeah. Actually, Daredevil is also the same way with the horns. It's something about it very interesting in a silhouette form, and that allows guys to play with moody scenes.
Yeah. Well, it's interesting you say that, because, like, you know, we promote, as someone who helps promote these books, it's funny how instantly recognizable some characters are. You don't have to draw Batman. You don't have to draw the full cowl. Are you looking?
Can you get me another Sharpie, a sharper Sharpie?
Yeah.
Anybody, throw a Sharpie up from the table?
Yeah. Hey, Ben?
Even if
do we have an extra Sharpie there?
A new Sharpie?
I have multiple pens.
You got
Toss it up. Just toss it.
Whoa!
I'll take both. Beautiful.
Thanks, Ben. Oh,
Ha! No, that's a brush. No, thank you.
thank you, Ben.
No, I'm good with this. I got these Sharpies. I'm good. Thank you anyway.
But yeah, what we were saying, Batman, he's one of those characters you don't even need to see the full cowl on the face. You just need to see the shape of it, and you know instantly it's Batman. Another
That's
one
true.
we discovered that's true for, and if you've seen the logo for our 25th anniversary, Harley, you don't need to see Harley Quinn's face if you see the little dangly, you know, I don't know what you call those, the parts of her hat, her cowl from her original costume.
Thanks.
If you've seen the logo, that's basically what it is it's the shape of her head. And Batman's another one of those characters that you can do that with. You know, it's a little bit harder when you're talking about a character like Superman. You know, you recognize elements of his costume, but you couldn't just do a
Well,
profile.
it's the symbol on the chest. When you
Yeah.
play with a silhouette, you just show the silhouette of the chest. But with Batman, the figure itself is a great silhouette.
Yeah.
And everybody wants to draw Batman that hasn't drawn Batman. And once you do it, you realize it's such a great character.
Yeah.
But it took me a long time to realize it.
So while he's drawing, does anyone out there have any questions for John Romita Jr.? You guys seem to be into what he's doing.
I make a great red sauce. I do the best meat sauce out of any artist in the business. I'm sorry.
I heard this. You
I
promised,
don't care what anybody, any Italian guy that says that they're wrong. I do the best Italian sauce.
Now you promised this on one of our first episodes of DC All Access we had you on. I've never heard this recipe.
It's the best. It's very simple too.
Uh-huh.
Just grind up some tomatoes. You have to get plum tomatoes, preferably red pack tomatoes. Everybody knows red pack tomatoes.
Yeah.
Or Progresso. You grind them up in a blender and then you skim out with a mill all the seeds. You put it into a pot that has sausage and ribs, garlic, olive oil, onion, and then you let it simmer and you let it go, and then you make your meatballs the next morning. It's the best. And I'm getting hungry just thinking about it.
Yeah. Are you inviting us over for pasta tonight? All right, we did have a question. What's your question, buddy?
Oh, how are you? Good to see you.
That you think about when you're sort of laying out a page from like script to page.
Okay.
Because one of the things like that I really love about your work is your storytelling.
Thank you very much.
Just so everyone else can hear it, the question was, what are some of the things you think about when you're laying out a page from script to page? Since John works usually from writer's scripts, what are the things he thinks about?
Honestly, the ultimate thought in my head is stop action film, and to pick the scenes that represent the writer's words or the writer's desires. You have to pick those scenes, and it basically has to flow from one panel to the next. In my eyes, a lot of guys don't always connect the panels as much as I want, and that's pretty much it. You got to make sure that it all makes sense. So if somebody moves one way, the next panel should follow that he is in the same position and moving the other. It has to flow to me. And in a fight scene, it's a boxing match. Somebody uses the left, and they should be able to use the right and cross over. I like to choreograph that makes it so it makes sense. Not that everybody else doesn't make sense, but to me, it has to look a certain way. And I like everything to move in as if it were a film, only stop action. That's pretty much it. I know maybe it sounds foreign to you, but in my head it sounds correct.
It sounds correct because my sophomore teacher at SVA,
Klaus Janson knows everything about storytelling. Absolutely.
he always used your work as an example of great storytelling.
Wow, I have to thank Klaus for that.
Yeah. And Klaus has inked your work, right?
Yes,
Didn't he ink
Klaus
your
has inked my
Superman?
stuff many, many times, yes.
Yeah. He inked his Superman, his first Superman book he did with us, which was written by a little guy named Jeff Johns, if
Oh, yeah.
anyone's heard of him. But now
And Klaus worked with me on so many other projects with the other company,
Yeah.
and with Image on Gray Area, my creator owned.
Yeah.
I've worked with Klaus probably more than anybody. And the
Okay.
great thing about Klaus Janson is he's an artist that happens to be an ink artist.
Yeah.
And that's something to say.
Yeah.
He's a great artist.
Yeah, both of you have done variant covers for the Dark Knight 3 series. Each issue, in addition to the main cover, has had a series of variants. And I think most issues you've drawn one, or at least a lot of them, and I know Klaus has drawn one as well, drawn them as well. John, a question kind of tied into what you were saying earlier. When you were learning how to starting to develop and learn how to draw action, did you study film and draw from like freeze frames and films, or did you look at other comics? How did you, like when you're drawing a fight, how did you learn how to draw that? Or if
It
you're
didn't
drawing
happen out of a concerted effort to study film.
Yeah.
Just growing up in New York when we had no cable channels, we had 3 movie channels. That during the summer, when there was nothing to do on a rainy night but watch movies with my father, he would talk about, instead of let's just watch this movie and fall asleep with a bowl of popcorn in your chest, he would describe to me what was coming next and what was great about the movie we were going to watch. And what's interesting is that didn't occur to me until I started watching him work in the business, that he was doing the very thing that he was describing about the movies. He was telling a story and what he was doing. And we'd go on road trips to Connecticut to visit my grandparents, and he would ask my brother and my opinion about a scene that he was struggling with that Stan asked him to do. I don't know, I'm supposed to have Spider-Man start here and end up over here, and he physically can't do that. And we would discuss it for 2.5 hours in the car. And suddenly the ride was over and we had solved his problem, he says.
Yeah.
But all of that started to coalesce when I began to read the books more often and then watching movies further with him, that everything he said was happening in comics as well, about storytelling.
Yeah.
And it stuck with me. Then when I got into the industry, a couple of editors would say you need to storytell as well as be an artist.
Yeah.
And it all came together when I went to college and studied design, advertising, illustration, and design. And I was suddenly designing things in the comics industry the way I was doing it in school. And then I was telling stories the way my father told me when I was younger, watching films. And I had one brief moment of intelligence, and when everything came together at once, I said, I think I understand what's going on here. Hasn't happened since, didn't happen before.
Well, I'm going to let John draw a little bit, but I wanted to mention something I've learned in my time in comics, and it ties in a little bit with what John was just talking about. If you're not a comic artist yourself, or really study it as a medium, it's easy to forget the fact that while they're both visual, film and comics, there's a lot more action in film. And I found a lot of artists at first struggle, and actually writers as well, especially when they've written TV or written movies, and now they have to write a comic, of learning how much action you could put on a page. You have to, it's in an action scene, it has to be clear what's happening if you're staging a fight or a confrontation, and it's a lot easier when you can film the whole thing than when you're going from panel to panel.
There's so much more, because I remember starting out and thinking, well, this is just an obligatory fight scene and I have to choreograph. And then it occurred to me later on that it's not just the visual part that's important. The fight has to have the story involved in it too.
Yeah.
But that took so long for me to realize it. And then it became a tool, because then you could play with the angles and the images and allow that to be part of the story as well. And that's the fun part.
Yeah.
It's a puzzle, and more often than not, it's a fun puzzle to solve.
Yeah.
More often than not, it doesn't always work.
Yeah, but it's funny how many artists, artists who are younger, maybe just getting started, who have been taught by other artists or their teachers, or that draw from film. Like they would pause movies and just kind of getting a sense of how things looked. So they're mediums that really can inform each other, but they're two very different mediums. I love the giant batarang. I don't know if that thing has a name, but I remember that from All-Star Batman.
For a moment, I thought that was a scimitar. Like an Arabian.
I stole it from Moon Knight. That's correct.
Yeah. He's about to fight like Ra's al Ghul or something. Like that.
Listen, at this point, everything that I've done has been done better by somebody before me, because I've been in the business a long time, and it was around a long time before I got into it. So coming up with something new and different, or drawing something new and different, is almost impossible. So once you accept that nothing you're doing is original, you deal with what you can do.
One of the things that I absolutely love about your art is before you decided Batman, I was going to shout for you to draw Maxwell Lord, because you're really good at drawing smug asshole villains.
I'm good at drawing smug asshole villains.
Yeah.
I love how you draw.
Thank you. Thank you.
I love how you drew Norman Osborn. And
Thank you.
And
Yeah.
You can just by looking at them, you can just see the error.
That's the advantage of being brought up in New York City.
Yeah. you can just see the arrogance.
They're all over the place.
Yeah,
Okay.
like,
And they're all driving in front of me on the way into work.
Well, guys, first of all, let's give a round of applause for John Romita Jr. This looks awesome. We usually give these away, and we typically do it by trivia. So I got a question for you. I mentioned this series that John
Vinny
was
boy.
one of the artists on earlier. Dark Days, The Forge, and Dark Days, The Casting. Who are the writers of those two books? All right, I saw your hand go. And you said, what was it? Well, he's one of them. Who's the other one? Do you know the other one? You got to know them both.
I don't even know.
All right. This gentleman said it's Scott Snyder, James Tinian. So it goes to him. Thank you very much, John. This was
Here,
awesome.
you can put this. You can align your bird cage with this if you like. There you go.
And again, let's give him one more round of applause, guys. Thank you very much
Thanks very
for
much.
checking
Appreciate
us
it.
out.